So today we're going to talk about urban sprawl. Cities defend their viability by controlling sprawl through regional growth management. Sprawl is leading to great dispersion of jobs, placing low-skilled workers beyond the reach of low-skilled potential jobs. Sprawl is also leading to greater fiscal disparities, which impair the quality of services in the inner cities and older suburbs. It's leading to greater concentration of poverty, which has devastating impact on education in the inner city. So what is sprawl? Well, there is no agreed upon definition of sprawl, which makes things difficult for urban scholars. So many urban scholars come up with their own definitions, but there are some key components that you see in many definitions. So sprawl occurs when there is low density, single-purpose residential or commercial construction in locations distant from existing public services and infrastructure. There are measurable keys to sprawl. These include low density, single purpose, where zoning strictly separates the commercial from the residential and industrial uses of land, and auto-dependency, where it's difficult to get around on foot. You can't simply walk to the grocery store or elsewhere. You're very car dependent. Now, who sprawls most? Well, metropolitan areas are urbanizing land more than they are adding population, which creates sprawl. Cities that have large developed highways and larger blocks have created sprawl. Non-coastal metro areas, which of course are less constrained geographically, tend to sprawl more than the coastal cities, though research has identified several different ways to decide who's sprawling and which metropolitan areas are not. So since there's no solid definition of sprawl that's totally agreed upon, and several different measures have been used to decide which cities are sprawling most, what I'd like you to do now is think about where you live. So, and the challenges that these things create when it comes to education, public services, public transportation. Think about where you live. Are there large, well-developed highways? Are there a lot of single-family homes in residential areas with cul-de-sacs where there's almost zero walkability? Are there a lot of strip plazas so you don't have walkable downtowns and mixed-use land where you have apartments above shopping centers and little downtowns like that, where there's mixed use of the land? And are the residents of your area mostly car dependent? So is it very difficult to do things like go get a gallon of milk without a car, or go visit people, go to a coffee shop? Most likely, if you see these things in the area that you're living, then you're living in an area that has sprawled, assuming you're living near an urban center, of course. So clearly there are a lot of single-family use, and there's very little walkability out in the rural areas. But if you're living in the suburbs or in the city, if you see these things, you are living in an area that has a lot of urban sprawl. If you answered yes to all or most of these questions, then you live in an area that has some issues too. Now, there are positive things to single-family homes and well-developed highways, and of course these are not all negative things. But this urban sprawl creates transportation issues, which put poor citizens at a disadvantage because they do not have easy access to public services and can't simply walk to places like the grocery store. Uh, you also are creating a place that um, people socialize less in, and so there's less interaction between people, and you're not creating places that people really care about. In the urban areas, you see an increase in things like public art. Because people like to stand in front of the mural on the wall and take pictures, and now they've created a space that people care about. You don't see that so much in areas where there's a plaza that has very little character, or there's single family homes in residential areas, and all of the homes look exactly the same. Uh, the cul-de-sacs and these residential areas and sprawled areas have very nice homes in them, but they also create a false sense of security um, by not having clearly defined walking areas and roads. So a lot of children play at the end of the cul-de-sac or play in the street in their neighborhood because they think it's safe, uh, and um, and that actually creates a safety problem. Uh, so think about where you live and what challenges governments have with urban sprawl.